let's do that one.
All right, so a lot on the agenda tonight. Two public hearings. It's Gene. Gene's here. Gene, do you want to come talk to us about the two public hearings we've got on the agenda tonight? The first public hearing is on the tax exemption for veterans, and the second is on tax exemptions for senior citizens. I'll let Gene take it from there.
Yeah, the veterans exemption, annually we do a survey statewide to see how our veterans exemptions are stacking up with every other community. When we did the exemption survey this year, we found that there was 3 categories that needed to be increased to meet the statewide average. The regular veterans, the widow of a veterans needed to be increased by $5 up to $185, and the prisoner of war needed to go up to $550. The other 2, remaining 2, met the statewide average. The Gold Star parents and the veterans who are 100% disabled. So in a nutshell, that's basically the story of the veterans, what we'd need to do to increase, to meet the statewide average. The elderly program, we do an annual review of the elderly program. We have credits that range between $450 and $2,100. It's based on need, depending on your income bracket. We were suggesting tonight there has not been an adjustment to this program since 2007. And since that period of time, Social Security COLA increases have amounted to 23%. So we're proposing a 5% increase for this year and then to continue it in the following years. A 5% increase would increase the program cost by about $11,000 up to about $242,000.
The only thing that I would add on the senior abatement program is that, as Gene noted, we are many years, more than a decade now, about 12 years, behind the cost of living adjustment that is typically done for federal programs such as Social Security. We have an adjustment here that's the subject of the hearing tonight that will adjust the amount of the abatement to people who qualify. We are not adjusting tonight the income levels. We haven't shifted the level at which the abatement kicks in. And part of that's because we just don't have a very good handle on how this whole program is going to work. So what we're proposing to do is this year adjust the number for the value of the abatement up. Next year adjust the eligibility criteria so that we get more people into the program. We want to grow this into that 12-year neglected COLA over a number of years. First step is to adjust the value of the abatement, and then next year increase the number of persons eligible. That's the more difficult thing to figure out because we don't know exactly what the numbers are. So we're going to have to do some sort of research, some sort of survey perhaps, to find out what the impact to the program is before we adjust the eligibility criteria.
All right, thanks. Any questions for Gene on these items? While you're up here, and Rob, you can feel free to chime in on this. I got an email from someone who was concerned about the valuation on farm, forest, and open space lands. You may have seen this. And I guess there's a state regulation for how much is a minimum that you assess it at, and where some.
There are state guidelines that are not law.
Okay.
And we are at $1,000 an acre of assessment, which is about, based on the tax rate, we have about $14.45. The majority of the participants in that program, it's a 15-year program. The statute does not address what happens after that 15-year period. There's no penalty. We continue to have people participate in the program after the 15-year period, but there's no penalty phase, and the vast majority, we're approaching about 90% of the properties that are in the program have been in the program for 15 years or longer.
I want to underscore what Gene has just said here. 90% of the properties that are currently getting a property tax reduction for being farm open space are not in the state program, and we have no guarantee that if they were sold tomorrow for a subdivision, we will have gotten what we bargained for. The 15-year program basically says you get an abatement for 15 years, but you promise to keep it farm open space. Once you're outside of that 15-year period, we continue year after year after year to give that abatement, despite the fact that we have no guarantee that the space will be preserved as farm or open space at all. It could be sold the next day after the tax bill goes out, and we're simply out of luck on that. So the public policy idea here is we're going to give an abatement because there's a public benefit, which is we retain farms and open space. There's no longer a guarantee after the 15 years for the public, and yet we're still giving very, very helpful benefit to the property owners who have previously participated in the state program. The value of $1,000 an acre is really low.
Thanks, Gene.
All right, moving on to the other items. Two communications. There's an email from a board member from the South Kingstown Housing Authority, Susan Jacobson, which addresses a concern that has been an issue for a while over at the Housing Authority. Ms. Jacobson had been in contact with HUD. HUD has sent us communications regarding the current management structure at the Housing Authority. The Housing Authority Director, Executive Director, Mary Aslin, retired or left. She quit probably about 6 months ago now. And since then, there hasn't been an interim director consistently. The Housing Authority has had a board member who has stepped up to make sure that the day-to-day operations continued. HUD has notified the board that you can't have a member of the commission running the Housing Authority. They can't be their boss and servant. You have to be either on the board or you have to be the director of the program. Since receiving that letter, I don't know what her title is, but the woman who handles processing papers that come into the office, sort of a clerical position, has been appointed as the interim director. She has indicated to a number of people that she doesn't really feel comfortable in that role, and she would prefer not to be in that role, and that she'd rather simply go back to her role as a clerical position. She doesn't feel all that comfortable with the responsibility that comes with being an executive director for the overall program. My suggestion to the council on this letter is that we simply have, well, my office could do it, that we simply send a letter to the board of directors at the Housing Authority asking them what is their plan to ensure that they hire a permanent executive director, what is their plan with regard to hiring an interim director who is ready, willing, and capable of performing all of the tasks associated with the job, and is there anything we can do to help? Remember, the Housing Authority is a completely autonomous nonprofit organization established under state law. The town's authority over it is your authority, which is to appoint, and under certain circumstances, if gross malfeasance is demonstrated, to remove commissioners. It is a very unusual thing for that to happen. At this point, what I would suggest is simply asking the board to explain what their plans are, because they need to get an executive director on board, and in the absence of an executive director, they need an interim who is qualified to do the job. The next email is an email from James Lathrop requesting allocation of $2,500 in funding for restoration of the Hazard Memorial Garden at Peacedale. Terry has informed me that she can handle this request given the resources available at her disposal. Any thoughts or comments on that one, Terry?
Just very quickly, yes, we've worked with Jim regularly on the Hazard Garden. He's been invaluable to getting that garden back in shape, and I've been in communication with him about being able to use some funds through our operational funds as well as in-kind labor and equipment. So we should be able to work with Jim to get what he needs.
The next item up for council action would be a letter from Patty Murray, Patricia Murray, concerning URI students using the parking lot at the Kingston train station. We've met on this, John Schock and the police and I have met on this. There's really nothing we can do about it. If the council wants us to refer the letter to Rhode Island DOT, we can do that, but there's really no authority that we have to deal with a parking lot that is not under our control. So we'd suggest that either it go on file or it go on file with a note to send it up to DOT. Resolution adopted by the Pawtucket City Council asking that the General Assembly change the primary day to Wednesday on days on which Labor Day is the day before what would be primary day, Tuesday. Completely leave it to the council to tell me what you want to do with it.
Just to add to that, I happen to know that clerks all across the state are asking for this. The reason is that if it's a Tuesday following Labor Day, that Monday will require a lot of people to come in. There's the overtime cost, but even more difficult than the overtime cost are getting volunteers or others to work on Labor Day. So there's a lot of momentum behind this change.
So, and Mike, so just for clarification, can the tasks not be done on the Friday before? Or?
You know, that's one for Susan, but apparently that's really difficult given what has to be set up.
Okay.
We use the schools, quite a bit of the schools, and we have to have access to the schools, and if we have to do that on Labor Day, we're going to have to require custodians to come in, open the schools, assist us with the setup.
Thank you. And so, Rob, has our Board of Canvassers weighed in on this? They have in these other two communities? Not yet. Okay. Thank you.
Tonight, the Economic Development Committee will make a brief report of the activities and goings-on at the Economic Development Committee.
Can we move them to after the executive session?
Your friend. We have a resolution that would have the town acquire the .gov domain for South Kingstown ri.gov. At this point, we are simply contemplating acquiring that domain so that we've got it. A plan for migrating from our current .com to the .gov has not been developed yet, but securing the domain and hopefully some funding to help us secure the domain will make it easier for us to make that transition when we can. A resolution establishing an ad hoc committee to review potential regulation of chickens. This is a result of the last council meeting. A number of citizens suggested that they'd be willing to serve on a committee and sort of work through possible resolutions of neighborhood disputes surrounding or centered on the keeping of domestic chickens. I will say that in the 2 weeks since the last meeting, we've had a chance to talk about this at the staff level. We're at sort of a loss. I'm open to suggestions from the public, but we're at a loss as to how we're going to resolve neighborhood disputes without actually prohibiting keeping of chickens or requiring fences. That's short of those two things, it's hard to know what anybody could come up with to remedy those disputes. So it's on the agenda. You guys tell us what you want to do. The ad hoc committee has been tailored to a 6-month period so that it has, a relatively short life, so that we can look at the problems and deal with the issue as quickly as possible and move on. Again, nobody at the staff level, short of fences or prohibition on chickens, it's going to be hard to figure out what we can do. The order of notice dealing with unruly gatherings. On this one, tonight we've got an order of notice that would simply change the effective date of the existing ordinance. It would move the effective date to June 1st. We'd have to have a public hearing at the next council meeting to actually make that change. But I'm beginning to consider alternatives to the resolution, or rather the ordinance that we've got at this point. Working with Amy Goins and sort of looking around the country at who's got unruly and public nuisance ordinances, we're working toward a recommendation to the council that I think will end up being a proposal to repeal the current ordinance with its focus largely on noise and replace it with an ordinance focused more on the conduct that is truly offensive. What I think we're finding is that the objection to the unruly gathering ordinance really is centered on the notion that it's going to prevent or prohibit conduct that's perfectly within the realm of normalcy for the community. People don't want to be on their back deck and have the police show up and say, hey, you're being too loud. The ordinance at its core, though, was really about activity that was more than noise. So we're contemplating a repeal of an ordinance that is mostly focused on noise toward an ordinance that is focused on the public nuisance aspects of that ordinance. I will say that it's worth noting that looking into this fairly deeply at this point, these ordinances are very, very common. They exist in Las Vegas, Nevada, College Park, everywhere. Wherever there's a college, there is an unruly or public nuisance ordinance. The question is really how much you focus on the noise and how much you focus on the noise plus this other stuff. And I think that what we're hearing from the public in South Kingstown is this other stuff, the public drunkenness, the congestion in the neighborhood, the taking up the parking spaces. It's the other behavior that really is the issue. So at this point, we're working on an ordinance that would, again, maintain the focus on the property owner, maintain a look-back period instead of 3 years in the current ordinance to something closer to a year and a half. 18 months might be enough to make sure that the property owner is on notice that it's not, he's going to have to look out for it, she's going to have to look out for it, tenant after tenant. And then things like, again, focusing on the activities as opposed to the noise. Mike has a very clever way of dealing with noise as well, which doesn't require heavy equipment or test equipment, but rather focuses on what an officer can hear from inside a parked cruiser. If you can hear the noise from inside the cruiser and you can see public drunkenness, we've got a problem, kind of thing. Finally, on that, we're very aware of the fact that the public was concerned about not Crampton folk style during 4th of July and New Year's Eve and this sort of thing. And there's no reason why we can't exempt the known celebration nights. And there's also no reason why we shouldn't or can't exempt those who have liquor licenses and those who have dance licenses or special event licenses. So again, I think focusing on the public nuisance aspect of it and not on the noise aspect of it, and then sort of honing in, we may be able to get to a repeal. I'm going to say it, repeal and replace.
Rob, I got a few questions for you on that.
Sure.
Now, the potential repeal and replace, would that occur at the public hearing at the next meeting, or would that occur at a subsequent?
So it's a good question. Right now what we've got is an order of notice that would simply change the date. The council is free tonight to change that, because it's just a public notice, to repeal. I would be comfortable with that because I do know that we've got a draft that we're ready to give to the council at the next meeting. So a replacement is in the works. It's not going to be a difficult thing. If the council wanted to repeal the entire unruly gathering ordinance through a notice and a hearing at the next council meeting, you could also do a notice at the next council meeting for a replacement. So it's up to the council, but you can do that.
You think you'll have the language ready?
We have draft right now. I've got language today. We didn't want to push it at the council tonight because folks wanted this all to calm down, I think. So we've got language that's ready at this point.
Okay.
So, Rob, if at a future meeting, if we had a public hearing to repeal and replace, we could actually do both of those in one meeting?
I don't think you're going to be able to do a repeal and replace at the same exact time because of the way you could if you put the notice for a public hearing 2 meetings out, you could, yes. If we go with our normal procedure, it's only normal in that it's what we do regularly. But if we do a notice tonight, the public hearing typically would be at the next council meeting. If the council wants to put that public hearing out for 2 weeks and deal with language for a replacement at the next council meeting, you could do notice and replacement 2 weeks out for that as well, or 2 meetings out for that as well. You could catch them up.
So an option would be issue a public notice to repeal, and at the next meeting have a public hearing to repeal the ordinance, and at that meeting
do a notice.
Give us a draft of a new ordinance, which we would issue a public notice, have a public hearing for a new ordinance to take place at the next meeting.
That's the sequence that I've anticipated, but it's also possible to do them both public hearings at the same night if you simply move the public hearing for this notice, the change of the date, which could become a total repeal, to 2 weeks, 2 meetings out.
Okay.
Good.
Right. So I'd be more comfortable, as Susan and I are looking at one another, we need to advertise whatever the replacement is.
Right.
So I'd be more comfortable if we had that in front of you, which we will at the next meeting.
That's correct.
That way you can give input and feedback, et cetera, before we actually set the hearing. So it might make sense that we do the repeal of the old ordinance and the adoption of a new 2 meetings from now. And for next meeting, simply change the effective date. By changing the effective date to June, it means it's not going to be in place until June. In the meantime, during the month of April, you will theoretically have adopted something new, and then we repeal what we've put off till June. I think that would be a better process.
So we're still looking tonight to move the date, the effective date, to June 1.
Correct.
Keeping that piece in place, right?
That way, the ordinance is not
right
effective.
now, it's starting tomorrow, it wouldn't be in place.
Well, actually, it would not be effective until your next meeting because you have to actually have a public hearing to change the effective
Right.
date.
Okay.
In the meantime, though, I think the message everyone got, as I understand from the last meeting that I missed. So.
That's actually pretty much what I thought I was saying, with the exception that I think that you could, if you'd like tonight, take your notice of public hearing and make that notice a notice to repeal. So strike everything. They have that language.
Instead of just pushing the date off.
That's
to
correct.
June 1, you could do that, yes.
So then, in order to make the repeal and replacement happen at the same night, it's strike everything and set a public hearing for 2 meetings out. Then at the next meeting, we work through the language of the replacement and set the public hearing for 2 weeks out from that meeting. And then you'd have your repeal and your replace public hearings on the same night, 2 meetings out.
But it's possible that you could do the repeal and not pass the
Yes.
new ordinance.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's going to be, yes. You'd have to be happy with the proposed language, and you may say, you don't want anything on the books. definitely be an option.
And then really the only other major item on the agenda is a executive session to talk about litigation.
I feel like there might be a lot of interest in item K. New business.
Oh, yes, that is another major item. You're right. It's major and in some ways not really. This is a resolution that would direct the town manager and the finance director to begin working with bond counsel to develop language that will come back to the council for a vote on what legislation to authorize a referendum in November would look like. So all this resolution tonight does is say to Zach and me, go ahead, talk to bond counsel, draft language for legislation, and bring it back to the council for approval. Wanted to make sure that we had an escape hatch here and could proceed, but don't commit ourselves to the action until you've had a chance to fully hear from the public and vet the issue. So this is a sort of intermediary step which often would be taken without council resolution, but I wanted to make sure that you've got all the information and you've got the opportunity to direct us as is appropriate.
Rob, if we get enabling legislation to move forward and put this on a ballot, at what point in time in the future would we have to determine to actually put it on the ballot?
So, when do we have to get it to the board, to the State Board of Elections? Is it
Have to get it to the Secretary of State's office in July
in July?
to be placed on the ballot in November.
Okay, so if in fact we move forward to seek enabling legislation to put this on the ballot, this will come back to the council at some point in June for us to actually determine whether to put it on the ballot?
I would actually anticipate Zach and I can have language done with bond counsel in a week. I don't think this is going to take a long time. So I would actually expect that we could be back before the council, should you direct us to do this, with language at the next council meeting.
But we won't have the enabling legislation at that point in time.
At that point, we'd have language for the council to discuss and debate that would then, once approved, go to the state legislature.
And then after that, if it does get approved, it would have to come back to us to determine whether we want to put it on the ballot. Is that correct?
We would need a resolution requesting the Secretary of State to place the bond questions on the November ballot.
So I guess my question is, in the event we do move forward and obtain enabling legislation to have this on a ballot, can the council elect or decide not to in the future?
Yes. Yes, you can. The enabling legislation simply gives you the power to act one way or the other. You can decide you don't want to. If you want to go forward, though, obviously, you need to have the enabling legislation in place. So it probably makes sense to have it there and then decide.
Really no downside to obtaining enabling legislation because we can decide not to do it at a future date if we decide.
Yes, my only hesitation is you're right that you're on a path at that point, and at some point you reach a point of no return. That point of no return, though, is when you agree to put it on the ballot, when you vote to approve it being placed on the ballot. Up until then, we're just seeking the state's authority to do so. Do we know when we'd have to have a vote to put it on the ballot?
Well, if Susan needs it, if the Secretary of State's in July, probably the last meeting in June is my guess.
All right, well, I think we've gotten to 7:30, so let us begin the regular meeting. Do we need to turn any microphones on, Sue? Good. All right. Welcome, everyone, to this meeting of the South Kingstown Town Council. It is Monday, March 9th. The time is 7:30 p.m. Our first order of business is the pledge to the flag. Today we have some special guests who are going to lead us in that pledge. These are Girl Scouts from around the town. So if you'll come up here and whenever you're ready. allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We also do have on our agenda tonight item 13A, which we'll bring forward just for this purpose. Find it. And 13A, under new business, is a resolution adopting a proclamation recognizing Girl Scout Week, and it reads as follows. Girl Scout Week, March 8th through March 14th, 2020, whereas Thursday, March 12th, 2020, marks the 108th anniversary of Girl Scouts of the USA, founded by Juliette Gordon Low in 1912 in Savannah, Georgia. And whereas through Girl Scouting, girls grow in courage, confidence, and character, and learn to make the world a better place. And whereas throughout its long and distinguished history, Girl Scouts, the preeminent organization for girls, has inspired millions of girls and women with the highest ideals of character, conduct, and patriotism. And whereas Girl Scouting takes an active role in increasing the interest and skill levels of today's youth in math, science, and technology careers, and to fulfill our country's economic needs, and whereas through participation in Project Undercover, a council-wide community service project, every girl will learn that she can make a change for the better in her community. And whereas the Girl Scout cookie sale is the world's largest girl-led business, teaching financial literacy to girls of all ages. And whereas the Girl Scouts of southeastern New England, which serves 12,000 girls in the Rhode Island area, will be celebrating 108 years of an American tradition with more than 2.6 million current Girl Scout members nationwide. Now, therefore, we, the Town Council of the Town of South Kingstown, do hereby proclaim the week of March 8th through 14th, 2020, as Girl Scout Week in the Town of South Kingstown, and urge our citizens to support Girl Scouts in their endeavors. Do I hear a motion on that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
So moved. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. And just a round of applause for our special guest, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. My favorites.
And please do stick around if you would like, but you have no obligation to do that. Yes. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Council President Collins.
Here.
Vice President DeCruz.
Here.
Councilwoman Kelso.
Here.
Councilman McEntee.
Here.
Councilman Veely.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of minutes of previous meetings.
Make a motion to approve 4A and B.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve item 5, the consent agenda.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries as well. And that brings us right to item 7, which is public hearings. 7A is a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the Town Code, Chapter 17, Taxation, Article 1, in general, Section 17-1, Veterans Exemptions. And you can read it in all its glory attached to your agenda. Jean, if you would like to give us a brief rundown.
Good evening. I'm Gene Bouchard, the town assessor. Each year, our office conducts a statewide survey on veterans exemptions to ensure that our exemption amounts are meeting the statewide average. There's 5 different categories to the veterans exemptions. There's Gold Star, parent, veteran, widow of a veteran, 100% veterans-related disability, and the prisoner of war. This year's survey indicated that 3 of the 5 veterans exemption categories needed to be increased to meet the statewide average. Those are the veteran and the widow of veteran needed to be increased to $185. The prisoner of war needed to be increased to $550. The two other categories we had, 100% disabled and Gold Star parents, were well above the statewide average. Currently, we have 911 veterans in the program. So tonight, I am requesting that the veterans exemption amounts be increased to per the memo that you have in front of you.
Great, thank you, Gene. Any questions for Gene from up here? Very good. This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody who would like to comment on this change to the tax code, feel free to come up and share your thoughts. Just state your name for the record. Or if not, do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to close 7A, public hearing.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. And do I hear a motion on 7A?
Second.
So moved. Any discussion?
Yeah, so I think if we have the same amount of participants as the current year, it's under a $5,000 impact to the town. And I know it's a good goal to be better than average, but I wouldn't mind seeing us get a little more aggressive in future years, depending on the impact. And again, we can't predict who will participate next year, but just my thoughts on it. I'm content. I'm satisfied being, slightly above average this year, but I wouldn't mind seeing us being a little aggressive. It's not a high dollar impact.
Any other comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. And Gene, don't go anywhere, because item 7B is a public hearing relative to proposed amendments to the Town Code, Chapter 17, Taxation, Article 3, Property Tax Exemptions for Elderly Persons. And again, this is attached to your agenda. Gene, why don't you give us an overview?
Yes, we do an annual review of the elderly program. It's a program that's based on need. The credits range from $450 to $2,100 based on whatever the applicant's income is. The income can range anywhere from $13,000 and below all the way up to $37,000. To qualify for the program, you have to be 65 years as of 12/31 of 19 for this year's program. Have to have owned the property for the past 5 years. Provide proof of income based on gross household income, including Social Security, pensions, dividends, and interest. Must be a legal resident of the town. Typically, that's determined by that you're registered to vote in the town of South Kingston and you have your vehicles registered here. The 2019 program, we had 157 participants. We continue to take applications throughout the year. The average assessment on a dwelling, a property that was in the program, was about $280,000. The average tax credit approaches $1,500. Total program costs are at just shy of $231,000. There has not been an adjustment in this program since 2007. The Social Security COLA increase over that period of time has been 23%. What's being proposed tonight is a 5% increase in the tax credits in the individual brackets. This would increase the total program cost to about $242,000, or about $11,400 increase in total program cost. So should the council agree with these suggestions, we're seeking approval of the proposed amendment.
Thank you. Any questions for Gene? And Rob, I know that you had a little extra to add in the work session if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, so the important thing to know is that COLA, the cost of living adjustment that really applies here is both the amount that we exempt and the brackets. Gene mentioned that the current brackets are $13,000 and less, and the cap is at $37,000. If we were to make a 20% adjustment to that $37,000, it would move the top bracket to $44,400. We're not proposing that change this year. We need to investigate what the impact on revenue would be, and we intend to come back to the council next year with a proposal to come up with an appropriate adjustment to the brackets as well as the credits.
Thank you. Okay. This also is a public hearing, so again, if there's anybody who would like to offer anything on this agenda item, please use the opportunity now. Or if not, motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Do I hear a motion on 7B?
I'll make a motion to approve 7B.
Moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries as well. And that brings us to item 8 on the agenda, communications. 8C is an email dated February 21st, 2020 from Steve Wood resigning from the Route 1 Stewardship Committee. We've received that, placed it on file. What would we like to do next?
So I'll make a motion that we place item 8C on file, accept his resignation, and direct the staff to thank him for the service he's offered.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. 8D is a letter dated February 3rd, 2020 from Sarah Daly Van Oot, resigning from the Economic Development Committee. We received that, placed it on file, and what would we like to do next?
I'll make a similar motion to Deb's to place it on file and direct staff to send a letter of thanks.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. 8E is an email dated February 24th, 2020 from Susan Jacobson, board member of the South Kingstown Housing Authority, concerning the management of the Housing Authority and the appointment of an interim executive director.
I'll make a motion that we direct the town manager to communicate with the SK Housing Authority, asking them what their plans are for an interim executive director as well as a permanent executive director.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion?
I'd like to discuss that. I think we should put a time frame on that in terms of a response back, because right now it's being run by someone who, in my opinion, doesn't feel they should be running it.
I like that idea, Bryant, that we ask them, to let us know within 2 weeks or, something. I don't know, how often do they meet, Rob?
I think their next meeting is scheduled for the 16th, if I'm not mistaken.
They have time to put that on that agenda and respond.
By our next council meeting I'd be amenable to that.
Do we need to amend the motion, or is that, yeah. All right.
I'll amend the motion to add we would like a response to those questions by the next council meeting, 2 weeks from today.
So moved. It's a friendly amendment.
Second.
Second. Well, it's a friendly amendment if he's doing it. Anyway. We have a motion. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. That brings us to 8F, an email dated February 24th, 2020 from James Lathrop, requesting the allocation of $2,500 in funding for restoration of the Hazard Memorial Garden at Peacedale Library in preparation of its 100th anniversary. And we did get some news on this from Terry in the work session. Perhaps it would make sense just to forward this to Terry. Or do I hear a motion on this?
Motion forward this communication to Terry at Leisure Services for some action.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. And that brings us to 8K, an email dated March 2nd, 2020 from Patricia Murray concerning URI students' use of the parking lot at the Kingston Station, creating a shortage of parking spaces for Amtrak rail commuters.
Make your motion to place this on file and forward it to RIDOT.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. 8N is or are resolutions adopted by the Pawtucket City Council on February 21st, 2020, and the Hopkinton Town Council on March 2nd, 2020. This is in support of legislation introduced in the Rhode Island General Assembly that would move the September primary election to Wednesday in the years that the primary is to be held during the same week as Labor Day. Any thoughts on this one?
Rob, what kind of savings can this yield by moving it a day forward?
There are savings because Labor Day is a holiday, and it's anticipated that if we have to set up in a school in particular on a Labor Day, we're going to have to pay overtime for folks to be there. It's also difficult to get volunteers, though, on a holiday. So the issue that these resolutions are aimed at addressing is both volunteers and the cost savings involved with not paying overtime on the holiday, preparing for a primary on the Tuesday after that Monday holiday.
Do you think that there would be any impact in terms of less of a turnout on a Wednesday?
Your guess is as good as
I think the
mine.
real question is, have we ever had an election that wasn't on a Tuesday? So it's an unknown.
All right. So do I hear a motion on this? Any other thoughts?
I just have a question. If we are in support of the Pawtucket and Hopkinton resolutions, should we have a resolution of our own, or just the letter of support? What would be more impactful? So that's what I would like to see. I am in agreement with this. I think there's no reason in the world that a Tuesday or a Wednesday would make a difference in an election. I can't see what that would do, but I can see how setting up the election is a concern. So I would be in favor of amending the motion to not only support this, but to have a resolution of our own.
All right. Do I hear a second for that?
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. And that motion carries. And that brings us to item 9, which is comments from interested citizens. Excuse me. Yes. First come, first serve. Please do state your name for the record.
Leslie Schwannard, 9 Emmett Lane in Peacedale. I've been here before, and I am an interested citizen. I think I saw you, Rob, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, concerning the feed for the television, when you have a town council meeting, that we can watch it on our TVs, and it doesn't say this channel not available, which has happened several times. So I went over to see Rob. He was very gracious. The last time, as a matter of fact, the day I saw him, they had a technician here, and he told me that the live feed, what happened was somebody knocked a plug out, and then they put the plug in backwards. So, we got no channel available. But you also had some ideas, Rob. You said that I think was Lori was looking into something for like $35,000. I don't know if you've addressed it or put it in the budget. And you had some good ideas about cameras up there. So, and now I'm putting you on the spot. This is what you told me.
I'm happy to inform the council if you'd like. The cable access in particular is particularly difficult because there are a number of components of the system. There is the camera, There's a decoder, encoder in the closet right here. Then there's the cable between us and Westerly, which is a dedicated cable. Only our signal goes across that cable. And then there's a coder, decoder on the Westerly end. All of those pieces have got to work, and they don't always work.
You said that this was kind of an old system that should be replaced. That's what you told me.
Yeah, it's as old as we've had for cable access, so I think it's 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that. It's not, it's not a 20-year-old piece of equipment, but it is not, the most leading edge stuff, and it fails. We've had this coder decoder fail on us a number of times. We've had challenges with the camera. We've had challenges with the cable between here and Westerly. One of the things that we've been trying to do is make sure that every meeting in this room is live streamed, not broadcast to cable, but live streamed. We've been setting up the camera. In fact, the camera location where it is right now is permanent at this point, and every committee that's meeting in here hits the button, sits back down, they hit the laptop to make sure that they're live streaming. So again, the objective is to make sure that every public meeting that happens in the room is live streamed at least. We haven't achieved 100% yet, but we're well on our way to getting there. The room isn't particularly well configured, and the camera is probably not exactly the right camera, and the coder decoder is probably not the right coder decoder for us to be fully internet savvy or broadcasting everything via the internet at this point. The issues with the cable access are challenging all by themselves. We've had a consultant through here who looks to find ways to do broadcasting of public meetings. We've talked to them about the cable access, and they said, we don't do that. We can get you, high-tech, digital. We're not going to be able to help you with the cable access folks. One of the problems with the cable access is that everything is now high definition, but the transmission that goes out to the cable company down in Westerly has to be stepped down to low definition to be transmitted, and then you're losing the quality of the picture. We've got the consultant's initial report. They're going to get back to us with pricing and all that kind of thing. But getting the room up to modern standards for broadcasting is an objective. Until we know what it's going to cost, I can't make a recommendation to the council. We think we're probably in the $35,000 to $45,000 range to get the room decked out with a stationary camera in a good location that we can use for all meetings. A camera that can be zoomed in so that it's not, a very broad picture, which is what we're seeing when we don't have a cameraman. We're just setting it out so that you've got a wide view of the room, and that's that. It'd be nice to have an automatic camera that had the ability to sort of figure out who was speaking based on whose microphone was active. That technology exists. Again, we're waiting on pricing.
So what are we saying, that at some point we will just get rid of cable, but is there a way that you could get rid of cable but still have it on public TV, still have it on the TV?
If I could just interrupt, since this is continuing, could you please add the issue of broadcasting meetings to the agenda so we can continue to have a discussion? Thank you.
I'll make a motion to add the discussion of broadcasting of meetings to the agenda.
Second.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So I don't know, what does that mean?
now
We
we're
can
talking
talk about this now. Okay.
So to the question of whether or not we will end doing cable broadcast, that question was addressed this year, and it was decided that now is certainly not that time.
Right, I
don't
remember you said that.
anticipate that we will be ending cable broadcast in the next few years. Now, hopefully technology drags us all, not kicking and screaming, but drags us all along, and we can move to an internet-based solution. It's cheaper, it's better, and it has fewer flukes. Not without flukes, not without problems, but it's less of a complicated
So if I'm watching this on a small computer or whatever, and I decide that I want to come because I want to comment on something, then I can run over to the town council and comment? But right now, what you're saying is we do have, now I'm not home to watch my cable, but when I leave here, I'm going to turn it on, but then the meeting will probably be over. But what you're saying right now is we're still using the cable, but it's very tenuous?
Mr. President, I don't think I'd characterize it that way. I'd characterize it as we are now doing live streaming of council meetings and all other board and commission meetings, or almost all other board and commission meetings. We are still doing cable broadcast of council meetings, and I do not anticipate that ending in the foreseeable
I remember you saying that
future.
to me. Mm-hmm.
That having been said, I hope that the technology progresses and we move in the direction of an internet-based solution because it is cheaper, because it is more robust and better. But we'll be doing both until we're there.
Okay. I think the frustrating thing for me is I start to watch it, and then I don't know if I missed the chicken discussion or not, but I start to watch it, and all of a sudden I can't watch it, and then I'm really frustrated. But no, I know what you're saying, and I hope that I will talk with some techies myself to see how we can, do this. But I just wanted to bring that up again because I'm not the only person that watches this on TV. As a matter of fact, you have several employees in this building who watch it on TV. So just a point of information. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jim O'Neill, Matunic. I'm going to ask this council over the next few months to really practice flexibility and a commitment to review any potential property tax increase. When I was on the council back in 2009 through 12, 3 years, we had 2 years with zero increase and 1 year with just a decimal point increase. And I don't need to remind you, especially those who own real estate, what a tough time that was for 5 years, 2007 to 2012. Coronavirus. A small business nightmare. All you have to do is turn in the television, and who is the first line of defense? Who's getting hurt? Restaurants. Any place with gatherings. Right now, the commitments for summer rentals are beginning to drop. I've felt a couple already, and I think we've got maybe a month and a half before we could lose the summer season. And I wish you would realize how many thousands of employees work for very small wages there, no pensions, limited health care, a lot of our college students, and we could face some really difficult times with our job market. We are in the eco-tourism world. We have to recognize that. Newport now is putting strategies together based on employment. What can they do to maybe kick into the state's unemployment to capture that difference so these folks can get paid and make it through the season. China says they've stabilized, but no one can believe anything we hear over there at the moment. But this is very serious. I might mention a couple things to you. Take, for example, a public company, International Game Technology. Slots, casinos, together, drinking, partying, everything else, Twin River, Tiverton, you name it. IGT sells all this equipment to them. 6 weeks ago, the stock was 15. Today, it closed at 5.5. If you want to play math, that's over 60% drop. This will give you an idea what they're going to be facing with their employees. Forget about the investors. If you want to turn the math around, 5.5 to 15, that's 3 times. So don't let the arithmetic fool you. There's a lot of hurt where there's gathering and pottering for the season. Having parties and having fun is very important to this area. And then finally, Mr. McEntee, I came in late, but I heard him asking a couple of questions about the bond issue this fall. And I think a lot's going to depend on where the coronavirus goes, because we may have to adjust a lot of what goes on in the state and in this town and live with what we have. I know a lot of folks would like to have a new school, new high school, some combination. but we really need to keep track of the numbers. The numbers are very important right now. And the other thing, too, is to avoid partisanship for a November general election. We all know in Rhode Island, in South Kingstown, it'll be probably heavily Democratic, although I think people can be very independent. But I think this is a South Kingstown issue, what we've been through the last few years on how to grow our school system, how to grow our facilities, or how to decrease the amount of classrooms that we have. I really think that ought to be a $10,000 bill that we'd be gladly pay to see how the citizens of this town feel about spending that kind of money. The general election will just cloud it. But a special election, and $10,000 is nothing compared with the $4 million we're going to spend already on bond issues, 85 requests, and you name it. I think that's only fair to the community to look at that. So to wrap up here, we all need to get through this. We all need to get through this together. I think I'd rather see some folks remain on the staff having a brother and a sister attitude that we all better have jobs and we can get to the issue of financial irregularities the following year. So hopefully we can have good minds put all of what we need to do over the next few months. Thank you.
Any other public comments? I would add it's our habit in town council meetings not to take comment on new business agenda items. So if you do want to make comments on these upcoming items, now would be a good time to do that. Any comments from up here at the table? All right, that brings us to the boards, commissions, and committees report. Oh, hold on one second.
Hi, my name's Martha Bedigian, and I had a very brief statement I wanted to make. I'm here in support of Superintendent Savastano's vision for our new schools, and I would like to also support the idea of having the bond issue be part of our November election, because I think most people will then have the opportunity to weigh in on it, and we might avoid the expense of an extra separate ballot. Thank you.
Hold on, wait up. We're going to hold on the commission report for a second.
Hi there, I'm Rachel Clow. I was pleased to hear in the work session that you are going to take another look at the unruly ordinance. I appreciate that, and also the big chicken controversy. What I would like to see going forward is a little more thought before bringing things to the council. These ordinances certainly make the community very anxious as to what's going on. And I think that before bringing them to the council and having people come in and having the chaos that has been, they should be really better vetted. You should really know what you're bringing, what you're voting on before. That would be great. I don't think the unruly ordinance was, as I believe from the beginning, I don't think it was properly vetted. I know that the town manager himself had questions whether or not commercial businesses applied. At first they did, then they didn't. So I am glad you're looking at it again, but going forward, it shouldn't ever get to that point that you then need to revise it. Thank you.
Roberta Mulholland, Matunic. So now is the time to speak about new business. Will you also take comments during new business? Okay.
Typically we do not. Once in a while I will do that, but.
So following up on what Rachel said, I'm just wondering how many ad hoc committees we have. Do we have a lot of ad hoc committees? And I ask that question because both the unruly and noise ordinance and the no chickens or limited chickens ordinances, those involve zoning. And it wasn't addressed in those drafts. So I'm wondering why when things involve zoning, for instance, I live on a farm. Was it to apply to farms? But if you look at these things in terms of zoning, you would say commercial zoning would be exempt. These rural zones would be exempt, and then break it down. And usually those things are sent to the planning board because the planning board advises you on things about zoning. They do research, they investigate, they have public hearings. This is what they do. And I'm wondering, looking at the chicken ad hoc committee, why that's even considered. I don't see anyone on there has any special expertise in zoning, maybe one person from the planning board, but why not do what I think we've done in the past? Send these things to the planning board, let them vet them, let those public meetings be held, and have people come to those and give their input on those, rather than have them kind of come right at you without anything. They are your people that you appoint with the expertise. So that was one thing. And then, and on the unruly ordinance, I was also happy to see that you're going to look at that again, especially and specifically with respect to the things that are already illegal. I think public drunkenness is. I think we have open bottle laws and things like that. My concern when I saw that was, I live in Matunic, and I live on Matunic Schoolhouse Road, and the next road over is Cards Pond, and that's where Roy Carpenter's is. We hear Roy Carpenter's music all summer. It's part of summer in Matunic. When I moved there, it didn't occur to me to say, ooh, there's too much noise. That is part of Matunic, that they have bands. I know who's having a birthday. I can hear people talking sometimes because you have loudspeakers and the ocean. So those are the kind of things I think the planning board would be able to sort out for you, and then you would get something that was not just put together by staff or borrowed from another town, but really the people on that planning board, they know South Kingstown. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, just for the record, on those two ordinances as previously drafted, they're very purposely not zoning ordinance amendments. They are civil penalties to be enforced by the police, not the zoning enforcement officer.
Thank you. All right. With that, Economic Development Committee, you're up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not Larry, okay? My name is Henry Thayer. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Economic Development Committee, and I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Larry Fish, who's on vacation in Florida. And I want to bring you up to date on some of the issues that we're looking at and some of the things that we advise you to look into certain issues. Keeping in mind we're an advisory committee, we are not a deliberative one. So anything I tell you is advice. Okay, firstly, personnel changes to the committee. We had two people resign, Sarah Van Oot and Richard Jerzak. Both will be missed. They brought a lot of time and talent into the committee and a lot of good counsel. It is certainly my hope that they're replaced with two people of equal stature, or better. One of the issues that we looked at is school properties in general. And what we're looking to do is to evaluate the tax impacts on residential and commercial property of the bond issues that may be on the ballot in November. It's our hope that we can get to a point where the electorate goes in to vote on a bond can vote on it with a very, very clear understanding of what the ramifications are of what they're voting on. So as those plans develop, and I understand there are several anecdotal stories that we can all tell about it, that it is still going on, and we'd like to look at that and advise the council on it. And one of the main questions is, what will happen to the abandoned property? If there's any property that's abandoned, there's ramifications. If the property at Curtis Corner is abandoned, well, in 1965, that was built pretty much as a tear down, and it has all of the problems that would go with a tear down. However, the high school itself, I had an opportunity, because I substitute teaching there, to actually look at the original blueprints of the high school. That building's got steel reinforced concrete in it, steel girders. It's a huge building, and when it was built the construction finished in 1954, it was really built. And if we ever have to get into a situation where we have to consider knocking it down, I mean, God forbid what it would take to do it. One of the other things that we counsel is the potential of a facilities infrastructure discussion with Narragansett, keeping in mind that when I was in high school there, Narragansett High School was in that building. They were my classmates. And I think, Joe, when you were there, they were our classmates also. And what we suggest, Larry and I have talked about this a little bit, is just a conversation over a cup of coffee and to see where it goes, if it goes anywhere. Because both towns have, in the past, have worked closely together on that type of infrastructure. It may be worth a conversation. Next is the Saugatucket River projects.
Henry, can we go back to your comment regarding Curtis Corner?
Mm-hmm.
You said something about it was built as what?
A tear down.
What does that mean exactly?
It had a very short shelf life, and you tear it down. You know, I had an opportunity a while ago to talk to somebody. Can't remember his name, but it was on the building committee when that school was built. And it is a long time. My mother actually opened a cafeteria in that school. But if you walk through the school and go from classroom to classroom to classroom, if you don't mind me elaborating, the classrooms are small. It's hard to teach in there. And on top of that, I went into a classroom the other day, and there was water all over the floor. And so I said to the janitor who's picking it up, I said, well, where did the water come from? Well, some of it came from the roof. Making a roof repair is relatively easy, but some of it came from the bottom up. So it gets you into a whole discussion about wetlands and whatever. But if you look at the building construction, you don't have steel girders, you don't have steel reinforced concrete, and all of those things that went into the high school. Okay, so that's what I meant by that, Abe, Brian. Is there any more on that, or do you want me to proceed to the Saugatucket River? There was a report that was done by Will Green from URI with his graduate students that was a vision of the river. That report was an all-encompassing, basically a master plan to tear up all of Wakefield and put it all back together again. And so that was thought of as being kind of extreme. But there's stuff in the report that taken out of the report as components are good ideas, like a river walkway. But most importantly, our advice is that we should clean it up. There are species of bushes and trees and weeds that are not indigenous to Rhode Island. How they ever got there, I mean, we can only imagine. But what we counsel is to get the place cleaned up so families can enjoy it. And it becomes a summer attraction. And there are, a number of low-hanging items, to go out and take a look at and see if we want to proceed with that. Rezoning. One of the things that was presented to our last meeting with the planning board was an extensive study that my colleague Jay Newsom did about zoning. And he went out all over New England and gathered all sorts of data. And it's a very interesting report. It's very lengthy, very complex. But we feel that there are low-impact changes that could be made to our zoning ordinances. On top of that, one of the things that came up was property surrounding URI and the potential for rezoning there into some kind of commercial use. If that could happen, it could open up the possibility of incubating some small businesses in the area and around URI. I found that to be very common, like in Boston or in Cambridge. But, we haven't really taken advantage of the surrounding URI area. And I think that would be a great thing to do. I mean, with all the changes that have happened up there, especially in the College of Engineering, the new facilities that have been built, it would be great to have some businesses, small businesses, incubate and come up with some new technology. Lastly, on zoning, we've looked briefly at the Cherry Estate on Tower Hill. The Cherry Estate on Tower Hill used to be the old Mount St. Joseph Convent, and the Sisters of the Cross and Passion built a novitiate up there. It's still there. There's also a chapel there, and there's the actual Cherry Estate. That's zoned right now. I believe, Bob, it's an institutional?
It's R80, I believe.
The whole place is R80?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So, Henry, is that the facility behind Prout?
Yes. Yes, and it's owned by the diocese still, but we've done like a back of the napkin rezoning of some of the property around there, and it would be nice if we could get something done up there. I mean, that property has laid dormant for like 10 years now, or if not longer, and it's time to get something done so it can be added to the tax rolls, which would be great. One item we're looking at that's on our agenda is commercial use of the recreation center. We haven't really defined what we mean by that, but it's on the agenda for the next meeting. And we're going to be talking about how we can increase the recreation center usage. The other item is the 2023 town's 300th anniversary. That is coming up on us very, very quickly. And we advise that this council appoint a committee. Because if you're going to get entertainment or even people to march on a parade, a lot of these organizations book 3, 4, 5 years in advance. So it's something that we've got to give it some attention, because having that celebration in town in the year 2023 could be a potential economic boom to a lot of small businesses. And so we're advising the formation of a recreation commission. I'm sorry, a reunion commission. Okay. One other question before I stop, because we've been talking about parking at the Kingston Railroad Station. Who owns the property that those cars are parked on?
Rhode Island DOT.
It's not Amtrak? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Henry? All right, thank you for your report.
Henry, your disk drive here, flash drive here.
All right, and that brings us to the town manager's report.
I'll try to make this quick. The main item for consideration tonight is COVID-19 countermeasures and what the town's been up to, trying to make sure that we're not part of the problem and not causing the spread of the coronavirus. We have begun to restrict town travel outside to conferences and this sort of thing. We have instituted a policy that one of these containers of wipes is within reach of every surface in Town Hall. We've reinstituted or refreshed the hand sanitizers throughout all of our public buildings, and we are encouraging town employees to stay home if they are sick. Beyond that, again, the advice that we're getting from CDC and from Rhode Island Department of Health is just wash your hands frequently. We are not at the point where any extraordinary measures in the area of social isolation or social separation are necessary, but again, we're trying to avoid conferences when we can. We're trying to use teleconferences for meetings with colleagues around town or around the state and around the region when we're dealing with the federal government. Beyond that, we're just doing what everybody should be doing, which is practicing good hygiene, cleaning surfaces with the wipes, and washing our hands as often as we can. I will note that until recently, the call volume during the day for EMTs had continued to grow. We've actually seen a decline since the coronavirus. Our calls over the last week are down. I don't know if folks just don't want to go to the hospital these days, but we certainly have seen a marked decline in call volume since this item was put on the report last Wednesday or Thursday. So over the weekend, we saw a marked decline in the number of trips via ambulance to the hospitals. The crosswalk at 138, we did receive disappointing news. We had reached out to the state to see if they would accelerate the crosswalk project. They've declined to do so. The letter for that will be circulating for signatures. We're going to come back at the state and try to convince them that they really need to reconsider that decision. We have had communication from the Recreation Commission on the implications for the playing fields at Curtis Corner, or at the Curtis Corner back lot, with the proposal that's been made to relocate the high school at Curtis Corner. We're going to have to schedule a meeting with the school building committee and the Recreation Commission, or a representative from the commission, in the next week or two. Actually, I think the next meeting for the building committee isn't until April 1st. So we may wait until the April 1st meeting, but that meeting is going to happen. I will say that test pits at Curtis Corner were dug last Friday, and the test pit results are going to be coming in from the engineer who was hired by RGB to review the data from those pits. But the town engineer also was in attendance and has expressed some concerns about whether or not a parking lot can be put at the top of the lot, the north side of the South Road School in the back area where parking lot had been proposed. There was also concern that the placement of the tennis courts may not work. So we're going to be in communication with RGB to see what their plan for dealing with the difficulties that were discovered during the test pit holes, from the test pit holes. That may change the Recreation Commission's concerns here, because those are two areas that the Commission was particularly worried about. If they can't be built on, then RGB or somebody who's associated with RGB is going to have to find another place for parking and tennis courts. So still very fluid. We'll see where that goes. I will note that parking at Town Farm Park has become an issue, and with the Little League season coming up, the Recreation Department intends to put rope up on the eastern side of Town Farm Road to prevent vehicles from parking on the grass closest to the field. We've got to figure out a way to make sure that we're not turning that into a mud lot this spring, and what we'll be doing is putting up rope to make sure that it's not used for parking on the east side.
So, Rob, with so many cars being parked there, I mean, where are they going to put them?
I really don't know, to be honest with you. My suspicion is they will end up on Town Farm Road, further down toward Kenyon Avenue on the right side of the road. There's no parking there, so they can park there. If they were to ask, that's what we'd suggest. But beyond that, I can't tell you for sure what they're going to do. And with that, I will note that the Old Tower Hill Road reconstruction project had a kickoff meeting on February 25th, and they expect to be starting within the next week. So construction at Old Tower Hill Road will be going on from probably next week until October. Yeah, nice project. And that's the report.
Thank you.
Rob, I got a question for you. This group that partakes in babysitting services while parents vote at the polling places, we got a communication recently that the local board of canvassers denied, those services to take place, I guess, at the polling places.
Do you know if they've actually addressed it?
They did. The Canvassing Authority had a meeting on Thursday of last week. And after having reviewed what the trust had said and what some of the other towns have said, and thinking about space requirements, security requirements, the number of people that are going to be coming in and out of the polls, they felt, and it was only for 1 out of our 10 polling places that this was being offered for. They felt that they weren't comfortable with allowing it this year. They wanted to kind of wait and see how it went at some other cities and towns have allowed it, not all of them. But they said they would revisit it again for the next general election series.
Is it something the town has had in place before, or is this the first
Never.
time? Never.
No, this is something new. A woman has set up a little nonprofit group and is trying to get these playtime at the polls setups to provide temporary daycare for children while their parents are voting.
Can the council overturn the local board of canvassers' decision on that? Do we have the power to do that?
So now I'm going to have to ask you again to place this matter on the agenda because it's not listed anywhere and we've gone beyond information.
Yes. Do we want to do that now? I mean, I imagine that communication itself will be on the next agenda.
It will, and it will actually give me an opportunity to look into it too.
Are you ready? Good to wait.
Just put it on the next day. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, just for the record, the reason it will be on the next agenda is it was received after the close for this agenda. It was received, I think, on Friday.
All right. Any further questions for Rob? All right, I think do we have any appointments to make?
I'll make a resolution to reappoint Steve Stewart to the Saugatucket Memorial Veterans Memorial Park Commission.
Here, second. Yes, second.
Second.
All right, so moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries. Any other appointments to make?
I think so.
Okay. That brings us to new business. 13C is a resolution authorizing the transition of the town website to a .gov domain as requested by the Rhode Island Secretary of State, and authorizing the town council president to sign a formal request to VeriSign Inc. Of Virginia for that authority over the southkingstown.ri.gov second level domain name be delegated to the town of South Kingstown. Do I hear?
Motion to approve 13C.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 That motion carries. 13E is a resolution establishing an ad hoc committee to review potential regulation of chickens as shown on the agenda. I hear a motion?
I personally don't see a need to move forward and create an ad hoc committee to review this type of regulation. If anyone's on board with that, I'd say we do away with this.
I mean, I would disagree with it only because we had people in the community that offered to, on their own, step up and be on the committee to talk about ways to, I guess specifically how the chicken ordinance or the chicken question came up had to do with if you have a small lot, should you be required to contain your chickens, or do you let them roam throughout the neighborhood? I think some people do have an issue with that in town that are probably afraid to speak up.
So the committee wasn't council proposed, it was resident proposed at our last meeting. The residents brought up the idea of establishing this ad hoc committee to try to come to some consensus, or at least examine the issue of nuisance chickens, I guess. So I would be in favor of allowing the committee. Let's hear what they wanted to get together. Folks in that audience were very anxious to form this committee so they could explore the options. So I'd be in favor of establishing the committee, and with the 6-month timeline, let them come back to us and say, this is a great idea or this is a terrible idea. I'd be willing to hear them out.
All righty. So do I hear a motion on this item, or is there further commentary before we get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rory. I don't know. This one is a tough one for me. I mean, so the committee meets. Let's move forward. The committee meets. The committee comes up with some recommendations, and then we're back where we were 2 weeks ago.
Yes, I hear you, Joe, and I think we also heard a little bit from Rob in the work session about the difficulty in coming up with any type of resolution.
But I still think if it's, you have people in the community that want to work on something like this, how do you tell them not to do it, in my opinion? I mean, we're not costing anyone any money. They're going to come back and give us their opinion, and we can choose to do what we want with their opinion at that point.
Well, it's true in a way, although I think it would take a commitment of staff resources, which is money in some respects. But that being said, if we think the public wants it, then we should be willing to spend that money. So do I hear a motion on this item?
So I'll make the motion to approve item 13E.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay.
Nay.
And that motion fails 2-3. All right.
Could I ask a quick question? We took solicitor's report off of the agenda?
So what we're going to do with this is based upon what's coming out of the Attorney General's office. We will put the solicitor's report on the public agenda when I have something to report publicly. Obviously, for instance, tonight we're in executive session on a matter. But if you have questions of a legal nature, you can ask, like right now, like we've done earlier in the meeting, to add a subject matter to the agenda for discussion purposes.
I guess I'd like to make a motion to add a discussion item just to get some clarification on a memorandum dated March 3rd, 2020 from legal counsel to the Planning Board and Economic Development Committee concerning ethical considerations. Did you see that on there?
There we have this.
So it's not an item on the agenda.
Oh, it was in your report. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I just don't know what that is. So
you want to
explanation.
add it on to describe it. So this is a memorandum from from Amy. It's in the manager's report.
We don't have to add it to the
Good. So this is a memorandum from Amy Goins to the members of the Planning Board and the Economic Development Committee. It's a restatement of the rules of ethics that govern the activities of the Planning Board and the Economic Development Committee. It's simply a restatement. It is just that. Is there a particular question?
No, I was just asking about it because I just found it interesting on here, and I'm assuming it's about proper protocol and how meetings should be held and who should vote on certain things and who should not.
Yeah, so, I mean, the basic rule of thumb with these things is you should not be voting on things that are of interest, that you have an interest in. Conflict of interest is that when you have an item before your board or committee that you have a direct interest in, you exclude yourself from it. And when you, beyond that, I'm sort of at a loss. I mean,
but let me tell you the genesis. So we are finding in our office that these issues are coming up quite a bit. And in an effort to be proactive, we're getting these memos out because there are constantly new people joining these boards. We're having a lot of issues across the board with the Open Meetings Act, the Access to Public Records Act, the ethics issues, having relatives or voting on things where you could potentially financially gain. It's really just being proactive. And it's not...
There wasn't anything that...
No, there's nothing that precipitated it that...
There have been a number of projects that came up. We heard from the Economic Development Committee tonight about the property behind Prout School, proposing rezoning in a property that is actively being marketed is potentially a place where conflicts arise. So again, being proactive and making sure that folks are aware of where the lines are so that you don't end up with folks advocating for rezoning while at the same time going out and soliciting clients who might want to purchase the property if it was rezoned. That kind of thing is the problem that this is designed to avoid, that the ethics rules are designed to avoid, and we've got quite a bit of activity on those two committees. So again, it's just a statement of what the rule is, a restatement of what the rules are so that folks know to look out for conflicts of interest. One of the things that is important for us to recognize is that this is a small town, and in small towns, conflicts exist. It's not that the rules of ethics can make conflicts go away. The rules are not designed to prevent conflicts of interest from arising. They exist in small communities. They exist in small states. What the rules of ethics are designed to do is to manage conflicts so that they don't undermine the public's interest. So the memo was designed to make sure that people knew what to look out for, and that when they think they may be in a predicament or maybe in a situation where they're getting close to the guardrails, they reach out to the town solicitor and ask for advice. That's what the memorandum was about.
And then the one last quick question. It was sent to the Planning Board and the Economic Development Committee. Is there a way to make sure that folks have received it, or?
It was sent via email, so I
guess what I'm looking at is I just want to make sure that whoever's on the Planning Board or Economic Development is aware of the memo.
So it was discussed at the Economic Development Committee meeting the other night. So I know that all of the members who were in attendance at that meeting know of it. I don't know, I don't know that we've received confirmation that all of the Planning Board members have received it. But again, it was emailed out, and
okay. I think just following up from the town's side, just to make sure that everyone has a copy of it, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. 13F is a resolution authorizing the town clerk to advertise for order of notice a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to the town code, Chapter 12, Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 2, Unruly Gatherings, that would change the effective date of the ordinance to June 1st, 2020, to allow further study and recommendations for amendment as shown on Exhibit 2.
Just a question for you, Mike. If we intend to repeal the existing ordinance in its entirety already, what would be the downside of advertising a public notice to repeal? Have a public hearing at the next meeting to repeal?
You could do that.
The plan would be to repeal anyway because we're coming back with a new draft. Is that correct, Rob?
So I can tell you what staff is prepared to do. I can't speculate about what the council will do, but we have redrafted the ordinance to make it less about noise and make it more about the activities associated with the parties that folks are concerned about. The issues are, again, public drunkenness, rowdy behavior, fights, illegal drug use. These are all things that are illegal, but again, one of the reasons that the ordinance was pushed was because the police don't currently have a civil citation tool at their disposal. If they're going to arrest a 20-year-old kid, that's going to be on the kid's record for the rest of his life. So the issue is whether or not we're going to do a civil enforcement regime, and if we're going to do that, we have to have the tool in place. It does not have to be the tool that was drafted the first go-round, though that is a very common ordinance. It's an ordinance that exists not only in Narragansett, but throughout the country. We can do it more on the public nuisance side, and we've drafted an ordinance that deals more with public nuisance than with the gatherings. It wouldn't necessarily have a number, for example, identified in it. But again, the focus would probably remain on the property owner because that's where the leverage is, to be honest with you.
So if a 20-year-old gets arrested, doesn't it, maybe I'm wrong, but I assumed that it would only stay on the record if they were convicted?
That's correct. Okay. Although I'll tell you this, even if it's just reported in the local paper, we're living in the era of the internet. Right. So, yeah, it's not on his record, but there's a record of it.
And I might go further. Many job applications, and frankly, if you want to become a lawyer, you have to report if you were arrested, period, even if you weren't convicted. Now, you can go ahead and say, yes, I was arrested but not convicted, but now you're in a position of having to explain in detail what happened. So if we have the opportunity to use a civil process, or the police have the opportunity, I mean, if the behavior is so outrageous that the police will go forward with criminal. The other thing that I think is important to remember, and we discussed this when we were adopting the ordinance, is that we want to find a way to make sure that the landlord or the owner of the property knows what's going on and can be held accountable so that we get that person involved with hopefully stopping future such behavior.
The new draft that you're thinking about, does that include a 3-year period?
No, it was 18 months on the most recent drafting.
I mean, that's the suggestion to all of you. And you'll get to see that at the next meeting, which presumably at the next meeting, you'll look at it and you'll advertise an order of notice. But we don't want to do that until you have the opportunity to look at it and discuss it and give your input and comments. But
if we chose to repeal, when's the soonest we could repeal? It would be...
Well, Rory is asking if you placed an order of notice tonight for a repeal 2 weeks from now, you could do that, and that would be repealed. And then assuming you even want to go forward with a new version of the ordinance, you may decide you don't want to, but if you do want to go forward, it would be 2 weeks hence that you would then have the hearing on a revised ordinance. So it's up to you as to whether or not you want to put the present ordinance off until June 1st, or you want to have an order of notice, just out and out repeal it for the second meeting in March, which was the 23rd. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to put an order of notice out to repeal the current unruly gathering ordinance.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion?
So I'm not in favor of repealing at this time, right? So I'm in favor of the order of notice to move the effective date to June 1st. And the reason for that is I don't want to repeal it without something to replace it. We still need to address the issues that were brought before us by the residents who are really troubled by both the Airbnb situation and the student situation that is chronic in some neighborhoods. I will be in favor of repealing it, if that's the motion tonight, if that order of notice is for 2 weeks, 2 meetings hence, where we can also have the repeal language along with the replace language. So yes, I can vote to repeal, but not in its own meeting. I need to have the replace language prior to before I can make a really learned decision on whether I want to repeal it or not.
I have a different thought process on it. The reason why I would have no problem doing it is I think it's an ordinance that we're planning on repealing and looking at new verbiage for a completely different ordinance. And on top of it, we're looking at potentially pushing out the effective date to June 1st. And I think we have plenty of time between now and June to come up with a better solution than we had originally came up with and voted on.
Okay, so, but we could also repeal next time and never enact a replacement. That's a possibility.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
But it's also a possibility that you move it 2 weeks out or 2 meetings out, you have the repeal happen, and potentially you have nothing to take its place, even though we have something to talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 2 weeks from now, we're
two
assured
meetings.
by the administration that we're going to have the language, right? 2 weeks from now. So a month from now, we would have the ability to repeal the existing ordinance and replace it with language that we've already discussed in the prior meeting.
That is true.
We've already had a chance to vet the language in the meeting that's 2 weeks out. If we just repeal next time, we're not afforded that opportunity.
Well, we could be if we decide to put that on notice, right, in terms of...
So, again, our procedure is we do a notice of publication, an order of notice of publication. That typically is it's the next council meeting. Typically, that would be for the 23rd. Because you've not had a work session or the opportunity to review the language for a replacement ordinance, you can't do that until next meeting. The order of notice cannot be until the next meeting, and the public hearing on a replacement cannot be until April 13th. So you could tie these together by simply saying the repeal will be publicly heard on April 13th. And that night you would have a public hearing on the repeal of the unruly gathering ordinance, and on the April 13th evening you'd also have a public hearing on the replacement public nuisance ordinance.
Right. I think that's precisely what Deb is suggesting. Any other thoughts?
I could be in favor of the last thing that Rob said, the last procedure that Rob explained. We certainly will have input from the public at that meeting, 2 meetings from now, and I think we'll make the best decision.
All right. So, Bryant, would you be willing to...
I'm going to leave my motion as stated with a second. You can vote on it.
So the motion is not this one that's on the agenda.
It's order of notice for repeal on March 23rd. That's what the motion is before you.
So, Deb, would you like to make a motion to amend this?
I think what you need to do procedurally is have a vote on that. If it passes, it passes. If it doesn't, there'll be a new motion.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no.
No.
All right. So do I hear a motion on 13F?
Can I ask a few more questions? Rob, just to kind of clarify, to go through this one more time. So if we move forward with advertising a public notice to change the effective date to June 1, then at that meeting that we have the public hearing, we vote on an advertisement of a public hearing to repeal and replace? Is that the procedure?
So,
After we've reviewed the draft ordinance that you give to us at that time, which is the next meeting?
so the order of notice as it's on the agenda, if it's not amended, would simply make the effective date June 1st.
Yes.
On June 2nd, if nothing else happens, then the ordinance that's been already enacted takes effect. In order to undo that, you're going to have to do another ordinance type action. You're going to have another notice of order of public hearing. You could do both of those at the next meeting. You could deal with this one and do both of those at the next meeting. But you're dealing now with three different ordinance changes. One dealing with the date, one dealing with the repeal, and one dealing with a replacement. You'd have three different things going on if you pass the ordinance, the amendment tonight, or the notice to publish a hearing date for the date and only the date. That will be on the 23rd.
Okay, so it sounds like we won't be able to repeal unless we have a motion to issue a public notice for a public hearing to repeal and replace.
No,
We can't do that in one?
As a matter of procedure, tonight you could simply...
Tonight we can't, but in the
Yes, you
future we can do that?
Well,
You just voted against that.
Right.
You just voted against it. So I'm going to try.
No. We haven't even seen a draft of a new ordinance. We can't repeal and replace.
You cannot.
We haven't seen that.
You are totally correct. So I think what the suggestion is so that there is some comfort that the present ordinance is not going to be enforced, that you adopt the hearing for the next meeting to change the effective date. Then that ordinance sits there, right? At the same time, at your March 23rd meeting, you will have the proposed new ordinance in front of you. At that meeting on March 23rd, you will do an order of notice for two things: the repeal of the current ordinance that just got put off till June, as well as consideration of the replacement ordinance. I think two steps. Tonight just deal with putting off the effective date to June 1. The next meeting, we'll do the repeal and replace.
I guess what I'm confused by is, well, not confused or troubled by, is we're planning on replacing it or repealing it anyway. So I don't see why we have to wait.
Well, but Deb is saying she wants to have something else in front of her, which you don't have this evening. Okay. I think, I don't want to speak for Deb, but I think that was your point.
Correct. So what I'm effectively suggesting here is that the order of notice stay for the next meeting, that we put off the effective date, right? So we advertise that we're considering putting off the effective date until June 1st, right? So the next meeting, we have a public hearing on that. That's voted up or down, right? I'm assuming at the same meeting, the administration is going to have for us, the town staff is going to have for us language on a replacement ordinance, right? So really all we're doing is giving ourselves an interim step so we can see the language before we actually repeal and replace. So the next meeting, we'll have a public hearing on June 1.
The first
April
meeting
13th.
in
Right.
April.
On April 13th, right?
No, but the next meeting, yes. Yeah.
At the next meeting, you vote on the June 1 up or down.
We will have a hearing on June 1.
Yes.
Right? The meeting after that, we'll have whether we want to put a replacement ordinance in or not, or repeal it, right? Because
Mike, I got a few questions for you. Sure. Now, would repeal and replace be two separate public hearings?
Yes.
So we'd have to
Yes.
vote to repeal.
Well, I mean, it could be part of one public hearing, but it could be
Two separate votes.
two separate motions, right?
So in order to actually, we'd have to be happy with the new ordinance,
Yeah.
repeal the old one, and then put in place.
which is what the next meeting will do for us.
Right, but what if you're not happy with, I guess, what if you're not happy with the verbiage, then we're stuck again?
If the repeal doesn't get majority vote, then we're stuck with.
Right. But the hope is this, Bryant. At the next meeting, 23rd, you will have the language before the next meeting, right? It'll go out in your council package. You can come to that meeting prepared to comment. Plus, you'll be setting a hearing for the April 13th hearing, and there becomes a second opportunity to discuss prior to, making changes, prior to deciding up or down. So you have two opportunities.
So the advantage, though, of doing it as a strike tonight, repeal with a public date set in April, on April 13th, is that you don't have to have a public hearing on a thing that is probably superfluous, the changing of the date, next meeting.
So, yeah, let
the
me
only
clarify, because as far as I understand it, the chief said that they're not enforcing the ordinance right now. Is that correct?
They have had no need to enforce the ordinance.
So tonight, we could potentially just do a repeal order of notice for the April 13th meeting and forget about the
Changing the date.
June 1st thing altogether. So those,
I would be in favor of that.
Okay, so then the motion would then be to set a repeal for April 13th.
The ordinance is in place right now,
It is.
right?
It is.
So right tonight, this ordinance could be applied.
Yes.
If, I say we continue down the path we're on, which, putting it out to June 1st, because then the ordinance cannot be applied till we have this replace language in effect.
Actually, for the next...
So if we don't pass the June 1 thing, tomorrow, somebody's deck party could be effectively, shut down. That was never the intention, right? So let's put the June 1 in, because now we have something, right? Are you with me?
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. There's a 2-week period potentially between March 23rd and April 13th, or 3 weeks maybe, the way it falls on the calendar, where there could be a party, although the chief has told us that they're not enforcing it.
Correct. But I will caution you that as we get towards spring and the end of the semester, the likelihood of the need for this ordinance, right, is growing. So I don't know. I'm still in favor of the order of notice for a public hearing to move the effective date out to June 1, keeping the tool in place until we have the replacement.
So that would be your motion, and there'd be a second, and then you can have discussion and a vote.
Yeah. And then potentially even another motion about the repeal one being for April 13th. Anyway, let's take 13F as written on the agenda at this moment. Do I hear a motion on 13F?
So I'd make a motion that we approve item 13F.
Do I hear a second? Okay. Hearing no second, do I hear another motion potentially to put an order of notice for repeal of the unruly ordinance on the April 13th meeting?
I'll make a motion to put the repeal notice or vote or public hearing for April 13th.
I'd like to suggest an amendment to that motion for the to the date, rather it be the second meeting in April.
And the date is what?
Monday, April 27th.
Oh, you won't be here. So would you want the replacement ordinance to be on the 27th then as well?
What is scheduled for the 27th?
Presidential primary. It's not like an election, but it's the night before an election.
So, going back to this again, the soonest that we could vote on to repeal is if tonight we put an order of notice, we could repeal at the next meeting potentially?
Could, that's the one that failed on the 2-3 vote, or you could put the notice of repeal on April 13th, which is when you're going to be hearing the replacement.
Or potentially the 27th. There's nothing prohibiting that or preventing that.
So the further we go out, the longer the current ordinance that is something we have all agreed needs to be looked at is in place. It's currently in place. The further out we push the date for this hearing, the longer the current ordinance that we want to see amended is in place.
Okay. For the moment, we have a motion from Bryant for the 13th. Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
So moved. Okay, some discussion. Rory, I know this is an important issue for you. You're going to miss the 13th. Would you feel comfortable submitting written statements? You'll have a chance to review the ordinance, the proposed new one, and we could take your opinion under advisement that way.
Can I withdraw my second? Because I'm not comfortable if Rory can't be here. I was not clear on why he was changing the date.
I'm not either on that.
So I know this is important to all of us, and I'm not okay with somebody already knowing they can't be here for the discussion and the vote.
Michael, I can't, if I got struck down once, I can't come back, can I?
Of course, someone else can. It seems to me then, hearing that and not knowing that, if you want to have the repeal replacement on the 27th so you're all here, you should go back to the original motion in the agenda so that you know that the present ordinance won't be effective during that whole period.
But the period in which it won't be effective is only after the 23rd of this month.
Correct.
All right, would we like to, Deb made the motion.
Can we consider?
We can reconsider that motion. Do I hear a second on 13F? As presented. I'll make the second. Second. All right. Discussion on 13F. Do we want to have an order of notice so that the ordinance will not be enforced until June 1st? That way, we'll have a month where we have plenty of time to consider the new ordinance. Any discussion?
Yeah, well, having heard everything to this point, it makes sense. Rory can't be here on the 13th. I think you should share in the equal pain. So it makes sense to me to extend or approve this agenda item to make the effective date June 1. And let's take the next step.
All right, very good. All right, all in favor of 13F, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, by vote of 3-2, 13F passes. 13H, a resolution authorizing an award of bid to AAA Sprinkler Company of Cranston to furnish, extend, and install a fire sprinkler system and all appurtenances at the Emergency Medical Services South Station, second floor of the Public Services Building, an amount not to exceed $46,200, including a contingency with funding appropriated from the EMS Facility Improvement Fund, further detailed in a memo from the facility superintendent to the town manager, February 27th.
I'll make a motion to approve item 13H as presented.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion?
Yeah, well, I just have a question. Rob, we're using that facility now for this purpose or not?
We're not sleeping there.
Not sleeping there, but the intention is to.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Currently sleeping in Snug Harbor, right?
Actually, I want to be careful here. I'm not sure where we are at this point. We were between strategies here, between Snug Harbor, Firehouse, and coming up here and napping with a fire watch. So I don't know exactly what the status is this week, but we're trying to work with the state fire marshal. We're trying to get a temporary approval so that we can sleep. And here we go. Craig's right there.
And for those that don't know what a fire watch is, it's an actual person from the fire department standing watch.
Yeah, we're at the South Station until 11 o'clock at night. And then we go to the Snug Harbor Station and come back at 6 a.m.
I'm sure we're doing whatever's safe.
Craig, while you're there, what's the status of the request to the state fire marshal? Because we were going to look for a fire watch approval. What's happened there?
No, we decided to go with the
decided
sprinkler.
not to do
It's going to be the quickest way to do it. So the company advised me fairly quick to get this installed. So making progress.
And fire watch would be an expense, right? An ongoing expense.
I'm sorry, what?
If there was a fire watch, it'd be a small ongoing expense. But
No, I believe the fire marshal was not going to approve a fire watch.
okay, I guess what I was saying, if it was approved, it would be an ongoing expense having to pay someone to be there.
Yes, yes, correct. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. So we have motion second. Any further discussion? All in favor on 13H, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. 13I is a resolution authorizing an award of contract to Central Maine Pyrotechnics of Maine, Hallowell, Maine, for the 4th of July fireworks displays in 2020 and 2021 in accordance with all bidding specifications in amount not to exceed $19,000 per year, further described in a memo from the Director of Leisure Services to the town manager.
Good evening. Unless there are any questions, the recommendation is self-explanatory. We're going with the low bidder on a higher number of shells for the event, and we've done due diligence in researching this particular vendor. So,
Thank you.
Motion to approve 13I.
So moved. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. 13J is a resolution tabled from February 24th, 2020, authorizing the approval of a resolution as prepared by Bond Counsel, authorizing the issuance of bonds and/or notes in an amount not to exceed $4 million to finance capital improvements at various schools, approved by the electorate on November 4th, 2014, and the advancements of funds from the town treasury and the subsequent reimbursement from bond proceeds, as shown on Exhibit 3 attached to the agenda. Further described in a memo from the Finance Director to the Town Manager dated February 20th.
So, Mr. President and members of the council, you remember that at the last meeting, there'd been some question about what bond counsel was looking for. We believed that from bond counsel's last communication to us that they did not need this resolution because it mirrored the language in the legislation, and the legislation was going to be sufficient. Subsequent to that meeting, bond counsel said, I really would like the resolution, so here it is again.
All right. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve item 13J.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, that carries. 13K is a resolution directing the town manager and the town finance director to work with bond counsel to develop language to be submitted to the state legislature to authorize the placement of a bond referendum question on November 3rd, 2020. The manager is further directed to present the language developed in consultation with bond counsel to the town council at the town council's March 23rd, 2020 regular meeting. The language shall be specific to a bond request not to exceed $85 million to support a school facilities improvement program as described in a resolution of the school committee adopted at its January 28th meeting.
This is a resolution directing that the finance director and I work with bond counsel to develop proposed legislative language that will come to the council at your next meeting, so you can decide whether or not we're going to ask the state legislature to authorize the town council to, in a later vote, put a question on the ballot.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve item 13K.
Second.
So moved. Discussion.
So I prepared a few comments just so I get the timetable correct, I hope. I can't support putting the bond question on the November 2020 ballot because of the following key concerns, and I think this is an important first step that I need to make these comments now. The process has been weak, in my opinion, and incomplete from the beginning, going back to the presentations by Robert Hendricks with the visioning effort, presentations that were done so poorly that spelling mistakes were being corrected while giving the PowerPoint. Remember, this is the foundation for the project. There have been 3 different times that I have had the opportunity to be involved, and the following is what I experienced. Number 1, we were told that a good cross-section of the entire community was involved in the process. That was not accurate. We were told that the elderly was included. Not entirely accurate. Mr. Hendricks and the school administration at the time set up informational meetings with elderly residents from subsidized housing. While their opinion is valuable and welcome, those residents don't pay property taxes. This is hardly an accurate representation of the stakeholders that are impacted the most. We were told that the business community was involved in the process. The Southern Rhode Island Chamber of Commerce was asked to assemble business leaders in a very short amount of time to give their feedback to the process. When the Chamber of Commerce, in fairness, asked for a longer period to assemble some business leaders, they were never contacted again, the meeting never happened, and worse than that, we were told by that administration that the meeting did happen. Number 2, I attended the workshops that resulted in 4 options for the plan. We were told that included was a cross-section of our community that would guarantee balanced input and would assure the best results. The room of 100 participants had 3 people with white hair. I was one of them. I also could identify 1 or 2 business owners, not a balanced representation. Moving from table to table, I observed that the majority of the participants were administrators, teachers, and parents. While they certainly should have been involved and their input was very valuable, in my opinion, the room was not balanced. The whole exercise seemed flawed to me. Instead of answering the question, do we need a new car, for instance, we were asked, what color car do you want? I contend that the options that were offered would have been much different if we actually had a fair cross-section of the community, as we were promised. Number 3, the first Stage 2 application was so incomplete and inaccurate that RIDE sent it back with 23 pages of criticisms, corrections, and questions, in my opinion. We are being asked to put the bond on the ballot this November. On November 3rd, RIDE will not have even responded to the Stage 2 app. We are being asked to trust that everyone will know what is in it. I can't believe that even the school committee or that administration knew what was in the first application, or I don't believe they would have ever sent it in. Can we really hope that the general public will know what's in the next one? The administration and RGB, in my opinion, should have been embarrassed. Instead, in public meetings, they were critical of anyone that spoke against them. Going forward, new school committee, new ideas, new superintendent, more new ideas. All good stuff. Now we are expected to sign on to a new request for astronomical borrowing, unlike any that this community has ever seen. Couple that with the process that has been seriously flawed, as I pointed out. Regarding the assertion that there is higher voter turnout in the general election, there is no question that that's true. However, registered voters are able to vote in any election. The opportunity is the same. As a member of the town council that recommended addressing the inefficiencies in facilities, I never intended that we encourage completely out of control facility spendings to correct irresponsible operational spending. While I absolutely agree that the voters need to have a say on a plan this big, they should have all the facts, including a response from RIDE. I could support a ballot question that allows the taxpayers to weigh in when they have all the facts and they're all known. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Further discussion?
For me, the language would be super important, and that's what we're talking about tonight. I think that, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I think that if the language came back and it was something that we weren't comfortable with, we wouldn't be moving forward with that. I think the concern is that nobody wants to have an open checkbook, basically on items that they're not quite understanding, and I think some of the concerns are valid. Some concerns that I've heard are incorrect out there. I think that folks need to understand that the move to Curtis Corner, while I think 70,000 square feet would be all new space, there's still going to be old space that's going to get, some of it's going to get a light touch. So you're not getting a completely new high school, but it's going to look new on the outside. The other quick comment that I had, and again, I don't know where it came from, I was kind of shocked by it, was what Mr. Thayer said today during his EDC report about Curtis Corner being built as a teardown. I've never heard that anyone say that before, so I would want to know more details, I guess, about that as well. But I guess what we're voting on today is giving the town manager the authority with bond counsel to come up with the actual verbiage. Then, at that point, if that happens, we then decide at that point whether or not it goes on the November 3rd ballot, or we request that it goes on November 3rd ballot through the legislator. But can you remind me when the legislative term ends? Is it June 15th? Okay. So we are, pressed for time a bit in terms of that. Because we don't want to send it in June, we want to send it in well in advance.
Yeah, and Mike, perhaps, we have the opportunity, once it's at the legislature, to potentially amend it if we decide that the language needs
Yes,
to change.
and as we mentioned in the work session, even if you have the enabling legislation adopted and signed by the governor, you still have the power to not go forward with it in November. So you've got at least 2 more shots at it for the enabling, well, 3, because the enabling legislation could be amended while it's pending, and then it's simply enabling legislation. You ultimately make the decision to put it on the ballot or not.
And frankly, how often does a body ask for permission and then not, with the intent of giving voters the right, and then not give the voters the right? This is a critical first step.
No question about it. Technically, though, you could stop it.
Any further discussion?
I'll just kind of reiterate a few things Brian said. I think it's just important for everyone to know that we are not voting to seek enabling legislation. We are not voting to seek enabling legislation to put this on the ballot at this meeting. We will be voting on that at the next meeting. This item here is just directing the town manager to work with the finance director to establish a language which will be presented to us at the next meeting. Then we will vote on whether to seek enabling legislation. And then if, in fact, we move forward to seek enabling legislation, if that gets approved, we still have an opportunity to pump the brakes if it gets to a point by the end of June for which, if we're not happy with the project, we still have the power to not put this on the ballot. But having the option is an important thing. If we don't proceed to obtain or seek enabling legislation to allow for this, the option is never there. I think it's just important to note for everyone's sake that options are important. Enabling legislation will allow us to do it, but that doesn't mean we have to do it, as Mike iterated. So I think, directing the town manager alongside the finance director to work with legal counsel to establish a language to seek enabling legislation is a first step, and I think it's an important step. So that's why, it's important to do this, and I think it's important to do the second step as well, but just want to get that out there.
And I guess in full transparency, we're talking about a hard stop number of 85 million approximately. And what we have to realize is that there's no more money after that in terms of projects. So if the project runs into some issues or pricing goes up by square foot, today I was told that the average, I think, is $535 or something like that, approximately what RIDE has been putting out there on the street.
So I don't know if it's the average. It is the figure that RIDE is putting its documentation suggesting you consider.
Right, and currently we're using numbers at 400 versus 535. So it's just something for the public to be aware of and everyone involved to be aware of that, you know, this is a fluid item, and I agree with Rory that we need the ability to put it on the ballot, but at the same time we can't wait too long on that, because if we do, then we will have no option. We'll have no option to put it on the ballot. So I would support putting it on. I would support recommending that the town manager and staff work on language with bond counsel to present to the town council at the next meeting, so that we can make a decision at that point.
So I think I've said already, this is a critical first step. If by the middle of June is when the General Assembly is finished and we get this authorization, we will not have a concrete plan to base our decision on. We just won't have enough information from the school building committee and the companies that we have hired. And as I've said, I think the process has been flawed to this point. We won't have a concrete plan that we're giving bond authority to. We won't know in July what the plan is, what the true costs are. And if your hunch is right, Brian, and we're guessing at 400 or estimating at 400 a square foot, and it is 535, we're not going to get the project finished, because we just haven't. If their numbers are right and they can build this, it's not going to be for $85 million.
Well, the project would get finished. At that point, you have to decide during the process what you're not going to complete. Like, meaning, what can you live without at that point?
Not the way that I would approach a project, and eventually your pants pockets are empty. It sounds to me like with this plan.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Vote of 4-1, that motion carries. And 13L is a resolution directing the town manager and the town finance director to work with bond counsel to develop language to be submitted to the state legislature to authorize the placement of a bond referendum question on November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Manager is further directed to present the language developed in consultation with bond counsel to the town council at the council's March 23rd, 2020 regular meeting. The language shall be specific to a $6.5 million bond request to support road and infrastructure projects as detailed in the capital improvement plan. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve 13L.
Second.
So moved. Any discussion on this one?
I can support this one. I know what I'm getting.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. That brings us to the end of the public agenda. We are going to move into closed executive session, so I have to ask you all to leave.
Right.
Thank you for being with us.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we move into closed executive session pursuant to RIGL 42-46-5 to discuss matters pertaining to litigation, including Steele versus Town of South Kingstown, case number WM-2019-0510, and Steele versus Deriff, case number WM-2020-0089, and pursuant to RIGL 42-46-5A, to discuss matters related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes regarding Ram Point Marina, Inc.
Second.
So moved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries.